Meet Lesa Bowman, a registered nurse with over 30 years of experience, a former paramedic, and she's now a board certified holistic nurse and intuitive guide. She's based in Oklahoma City, and her path, it didn't start in holistic health. In fact, her career began on the front lines, responding to emergencies where every second mattered. But somewhere along the way, she realized that healing isn't just about stabilizing the body. It's about creating coherence between the mind, body, and emotions. Thank you so much for joining me today, Lesa. I'm really looking forward to the conversation we're going to have about your personal healing journey and how you transformed your life and how you come alongside of the clients that you work with. And then I'm kind of a little excited and nervous because in part two, you're going to walk me through one of your exercises that you do with clients, and we're going to see how that is experienced. So thanks so much for being willing to join me today.
Thanks, Megan. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm a little nervous about meeting with you and taking this moment to talk about myself. I'm always excited to talk about my work, but I know you wanted to hear a little bit about me. So here I am showing up.
These are not easy conversations. They're very vulnerable. And I just really appreciate those who come on the It's Your Story to Tell podcast and are willing to share, because I think it's so valuable to hear people's journey. For me, it gives hope and inspiration. It also allows others to see how they might have experienced something similar, and it allows them to think of it in a whole new way. And so I really appreciate that. And the other thing that I think is really valuable about us sharing our stories is it really helps to reduce shame when talking about these really hard
Mhm.
subjects. And shame, I know in my own story, was a really big thing that kept me stuck for a really long time. And I am a recovering perfectionist, people pleaser, high achiever. And when I did my first episode, gosh, I don't know, it's been 70 something episodes. I'll tell you, I was so nervous and like, what the heck am I doing? Am I even actually going to put this out there? So I, not too long ago, can remember and empathize with you joining me. But thank you so much for being here and being vulnerable.
Well, thank you. So I guess I have to start with me as a kid. It really goes all the way back to that. Not so much the holistic nurse part, but definitely the intuitive guide part. So, like most children, I was what you might term as a highly sensitive person, or I was extrasensory, however you want to, you know, term it. It doesn't really matter. There's a certain percentage of children under the age of 7, and it's a very high number that they do see things that adults don't see. They do experience non-physical energies. And as a kid, I was aware of a lot more than most of the adults around me, but was quickly shamed with it and told that it was of the devil or that it was not okay. And so then you internalize that and you take on that shame, you take on those beliefs. So, in order to take on distorted beliefs, you have to let go of a part of yourself. And then we wonder why we often feel fractured or just not whole. And it's because of these parts of ourself that we let go of.
Mm.
So as I moved through life, I had a very successful career as a paramedic and as a nurse. But in all actuality, I was a high functioning hot mess because I was not grounded.
I can
I
identify. I'm not laughing at you. I'm like, I like the way you put that. High functioning hot mess. I have not heard that. And I'm like, that would have been such a good description of who I was in
yeah,
my mid-ish 30s.
same. It's a tough place to live. You know, there's just this cacophony of noise in the head, all of these thoughts, all of these stories, and no way to check them. No discipline of thought. You have a
Mm.
thought, it creates this emotion, this feeling in the body. And before you know it, you're just a victim to this whole play of events. Well, things kind of built up for me. And in 2009, my mother passed. That put me into what I would consider a dark night of the soul. And for 3 years, it was pretty rough. I was in a lot of pain and a certain level of brokenness. And then in 2012, through a series of exciting events, things started changing. And I realized, oh, I have to question it all. I have to question every belief, every thought.
Mm.
I have to see, have I agreed to something that actually insulted my soul?
Understand and identify with that, because that was when I started on my journey. It was recognizing how my thoughts were creating a reality, and these thoughts, where did they even come from? So many of them weren't even really my thoughts. They were in my head, but they were things that were other people's
Right.
voices and their beliefs. And I was like, I think I was having a crisis of identity, because I'm like, I don't even know who I am, what I like. I have lived this life to please so many other people, and really had to take some time to really discover, who am I?
Exactly. Because most of us have just been living a life according to who we thought we needed to be for somebody else so that we had approval or acceptance or whatever it was. So in 2012, I decided I needed to figure out what it looked like to get it together and to make some things right and to live a life of integrity, which is what I truly desired. And I
Mm.
knew that where I was at was not where I wanted to stay. And I knew it was time to get back to my roots. I always was very comfortable in working in altered states of consciousness. And as a child, that was kind of, it was just, it was just what I did. I didn't know it was a thing. It's just what I did. And so I was ready to get back to that place because I knew in that space there were answers. I knew in
Mm.
that space that I would find peace. And it was just a matter of going inward. So if you're wanting to work with a younger part of you that keeps showing up in triggers, that's where I was introduced to parts work. I didn't realize that these younger parts of ourselves stay active, especially if they have a distortion at play. And they show up in our triggers, they show up in our patterns, they show up in our dysfunction. And so I began to learn, oh, there's a way to work with those parts, to heal them so that those patterns, those behaviors are no longer showing up. Beginning to understand how thoughts affect emotion and how emotion that's stuck in our body then, creates the opposite of ease, which is dis-ease, which is disease. And so I
Mhm.
started getting more and more curious of this entire connection and how it all plays together. And so I started doing my own work and I started healing. I started clearing old, false, fixed beliefs that this flat were not mine and they did not serve me. And it's a process. I think we do it our entire life. There's no
Mhm.
arriving. And there's always a new teacher showing up to teach us a new thing or just a new layer of understanding of something we've already worked on. I also got very caught up in thought work, and I'm kind of a smart aleck and clever by nature, and so I'm good at navigating the games and the mental gymnastics that we play and helping through, probing and just the right provoking questions where people can then see, oh, that's where I'm telling myself a story.
I think that's so powerful. You have your perspective. It's what you grew up in or what you've been comfortable in. And so it's oftentimes hard to even know what question to ask yourself. And I found it so powerful to have someone helping me with the questions, not giving me the answers, because I spent
Right.
a lot of time in counseling where I was looking at someone to be the expert and to tell me what was wrong with me and how do I fix it.
Hmm.
And it wasn't really working. And we were talking about the same things over and over again, sometimes to the point of re-traumatizing. You go out of a session and you feel so triggered and your nervous system is been hijacked and you're now sent out because you only had an hour and you never were even able to come back down and into a safe space. And it was very different when I worked with someone who was more like a coach, who had a similar story to mine, and so was very intuitive into things that I was saying or not saying, because that's also the case when you don't want to necessarily say something because you actually, I realized there were times in my life that I didn't want to ask the question because I knew I needed to deal with it.
Right.
And so having that support in that space of safety and just that co-regulation and being able to explore that was really powerful for me. And I think you offering that to your clients, I could see how beneficial it would be for them.
It is, and especially, as you pair it with somatic work, it's just you're bringing the thought work, which is your mind, and then your somatic work is the body, and then noticing where you're, carrying that emotion and naming, being very specific with that emotion. You're addressing all three of those components of that complex, which in and of itself brings a lot of people into a more coherent state. But it took many years of doing this work with myself to try to find, how does this really even look? How do you do this? I found bits and pieces here and there, and I blended work from this person and found something that worked. And next thing, I've got people showing up going, "Hey, we're curious what you're doing." And so I'm like, well, I can show you. And it was so much of it is getting people out of their head and into their body where they can tap into their own wisdom because it's all there
Mhm.
waiting for them. And I think our job as holistic nurses or nurse coaches is to guide people to that place.
When you can guide them to that, then they are empowered and they're given these tools. They can continue to use them because, like you said, this is a continual journey. I mean, I just even this past week, I have had some really deep work that has led to some pretty exciting things for me and emotional freedom and breakthroughs in areas. I just love this work now. I used to be
Mhm.
so afraid
It's
of
exciting.
looking at the hard or the trigger or getting aware of what my body was trying to tell me, and now I'm like, ooh, what do you want to tell me? Like, I want to hear it, I want to learn. And it's so fun when you can start shifting into this place of really enjoying the lessons and the experience of learning. And I think for me, I had to deal with that perfectionism and the people pleasing aspect of it
Mhm.
so that I could get to this enjoyment, because that was always drowning out my own intuition.
Yeah, right. And, I always tell people that curiosity is the lubricant to doing this work. If you can get curious, you immediately take yourself out of victimhood, however
Mm.
subtle. And as you move out of victimhood, then anything is possible. So maybe my story that's hurting my feelings isn't going to be quite so painful when I get curious and I look, is that even really true? Oh, no, it's not even true. And then we create freedom within ourselves. And you're right, what you were saying about it doesn't do any good because we can intuit something and see it and tell it to a person. That does absolutely no good. That does not shift anybody. Now, I may intuit that, oh, wow, there's this massive brick wall and blah, blah, blah. But if I ask them instead, do you feel like there's something preventing you from getting from where you are to where you want to be? Oh, yeah, it feels like there's this brick wall. Well, now they have connection to it. They have
Mm-hmm.
something that's experiential. Now that changes people. And so the way I look at things, my job is to guide them to that place where they organically have that experience with self.
When you connect back to self, because all of these things we're talking about are where you're so disconnected from yourself,
Yeah.
and by offering that uh, guidance to finding themselves, and then once they start doing it, they learn. It's like you're modeling how this curiosity works. If I had a victim mentality, I didn't realize it. I would never have thought I was a victim. I
Right.
thought I was this really strong person who could handle anything, can just pull myself up from my bootstraps. But I was going around thinking like, life, this is hard, life's not fair. I had no agency in being able to kind of change my life. If I wanted something different, but I didn't know how to get there. And that victimhood, you're right, when I started to embrace curiosity of my
Mm-hmm.
thoughts and all of those things, I became less of a victim because I was empowered in the process of asking myself these questions and getting some clarity. I love how you connected those two. I can see what you're saying with that. So, Lesa and I have been sharing with you a little bit about our journey and how we have come to know ourselves a little bit better. But I love one of the words that Lesa uses, and it is coherence. It's a big word for me, but I wanted to hear from you. What does that mean? And how would you know if you are or are not there?
Great. So coherence to me, when I talk about coherence, I'm talking about coherence of the mind, body, and emotion complex. So you can think of a triangle or a trinity symbol, however you want to look at it, and each of those points being representative mind, body, and emotion. If we don't have coherence, if the energy is not flowing between these three parts of us, then we go into a disharmonious state, an incoherent state. We become often just dysregulated. So when we're in that dysregulated state, when we're in the incoherent state, we may have behaviors such as distracting, being destructive, drugging, deluding ourselves, or being in denial. Several of my younger male clients have taught me dickery. I should add to my D list. And they said whenever they don't want to deal with their emotions, they just act like a dick. So I was like, I think I'll add that to my list.
For them for recognizing that, in
Right. And
themselves.
educating me. I had no
Right?
idea. So, we might also even fall into deluding ourselves that everything is okay. And
Mm,
that's what we see when we're in that incoherent state. Now, when we're in the coherent state and we're in that state of flow, we're in a state of ease, things are coming together, synchronicities are showing up. We feel calm, we feel centered, we feel compassionate and curious. We have a Christ like attitude. We are in a very different place energetically. a place of ease.
Mm-hmm.
When we're in the D's, we're often in a place of dis-ease, which is why it often leads to disease. And so the big goal is, how do I keep myself in a state of ease and in a place of coherence?
Okay, so we were talking about the differences and talking about when you find yourself in the D's, which lead to disease. I was in denial a lot, maybe some delusion. How do you move from this state of incoherence to coherence?
So when a client comes to me, of course, I'm going to sit down and listen to them and see what it is that they've got going on that they feel that I can help them with. So some people may come to me, and part of that, triangle, that trinity within them might be the mind. The mind, they're constantly lost in their head. They're constantly thinking about stories of the past, or they are constantly obsessed with things that might happen, or stories they're creating and their imagination, and then they create the story, and then they have the whole emotion, or they project it on somebody else. So somebody that's kind of locked in their mind, we may be doing a lot of thought work with them. Now I may have somebody that comes in and all they have is the somatic awareness that I'm having this emotion and I'm feeling it in my gut, and I really don't know what's going on. And so we may
Mm.
do some somatic experiencing work so that they can learn how to actually sit with what they're feeling, allow themselves to be present with an emotion, to actually be with that emotion and to understand it, to bear witness to it. And so some people may find that when they're sitting with that emotion, that oftentimes it takes them back to a younger version of themselves. And so many times then, once they come in contact with that younger version, that's where they'll see that in that moment they took on a belief that was actually not congruent with reality. It wasn't totally
Mm.
true. It was a lie. It's the moment that we take on a belief like, I'll never be good enough, or, nobody's ever going to really love me. I cannot be who I actually am, or I won't be loved. It's all of those stories, the very common ones. Everyone has a mother and a father wound. Everybody has an abandonment and a rejection wound, and they show up in
Mhm.
different ways. And so, depending on how they show up, we work with whatever's showing up. But my goal is to equip them with the skills that they can effectively work with their emotions day in and day out. I don't want them needing to come back to me. I want to have served them well, that they have skills, and that they can also sit with their friends when they see their friend is caught in a story, some kind of a thought distortion, that they would know the right questions to ask them to maybe help them find the same liberation.
I'm excited to be able to demonstrate what some of your work is for people who are listening. So thank you for sharing your story and how this journey that you went on in your own life has led you to a business that you weren't even expecting, because people were just coming to you and like, okay, help me. I hope listeners that you have been inspired by Lesa and her journey, but also for you to get curious and reflect on your journey and question, what could healing look like for you? Where is there an area that you could have some healing? So when she's working with me, maybe there's an opportunity for you to be working alongside of me and thinking about how this might be able to help you wherever you're at in the story that you're telling yourself. So thank you, Lesa. I'm looking forward to coming back with you.
All right, thank you.